kindly introduce me. Hi, I'm Mariana. I am here to talk to you about the prep you would likely want to do before an interview, especially as a junior developer. Interviews are a beast in themselves, and it's not enough to know coding to pass interviews. You need to know how to pass interviews to pass interviews. And unfortunately, unless you're going through a boot camp where they actually cover this in depth, you really have to figure it out as you go. And whatever I teach you, there's nothing better than your own experience. So trust what you're going to experience and what you're going to learn on the way. Right. And who am I? I am Mariana Bocoi. I am a Devops Consultant at Regent. And I am currently on assignment at Utopia. And DevOps, for the people that haven't really dug deep enough yet, is around cloud, infrastructure, service, setup of things, and very much about best practices. And I actually have a degree in computers. I have a master's in software systems engineering. I've been a backend developer for 10 years, and I've been a DevOps engineer, or whatever people call themselves, for around 1 year now. And I actually interviewed people for 3 different companies. I'm also a Women Tech Makers ambassador and part of an organization called Ping Programming here in Sweden, which strives to improve the gender balance in tech. And I co-organize a meetup called Google Developers Group Cloud here in Stockholm, Sweden. First, let's talk a bit about how it started. And this is kind of important because everything that I'm gonna say is based on my experience and what I've been through. So it's good to have the knowledge that I've been around for a while and maybe some things were easier for me or different. And also, as I mentioned before, I've been mostly interviewing in Sweden. So the interview processes might differ in different countries and different cultures. So do look out for specifics around what could be different. But my journey in tech began in 1990s in a small city called Cernavodă in Romania. Actually, it started way before that, when my mom, before I was born, was studying software, when she actually worked with punch cards. And we still had punch cards around in the household when I was young, so that was fun. I used them as notebooks. I didn't really figure out what they were until later in my life. But yeah, that's me. I started with computers when there were no operating systems. I was literally working on the command line. In order to install my computer at the beginning, I had to use like those 4 floppy disks or whatever. And then it just grew and grew with Windows 95 and XP and stuff like that. And I played retro games. So my journey with computers started very early on. And as you might have guessed, I am from Romania. I did my studies there, my bachelor's in computer science. I went to this specialization called math-informatics. So we like to joke that it was math minus the informatics, because we really studied a lot of math that I forgot now. My partner was talking today to me about derivatives, and I was like, I don't remember how to calculate one and what they were used for, which is true. But we did learn some IT. And then I moved on to Germany, to a small city called Aachen, at the border between Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium. And I studied human-computer interaction and usability, and my master's was on wearable computing, so electronics. I did my own circuits and stuff. And then I very quickly got a student job at Ericsson, and after that, I got hired straight off from university. So I didn't really have a lot of friction between graduating and starting into tech. And then afterwards, I quit Ericsson to move to Sweden, which is funny because most people come to Sweden to join Ericsson, but there you go. And here I worked at a couple of different companies. I started with Klarna, then I worked with Volvo Car Mobility, a little bit at Lendo, and now I'm at Utopia and Regent. But yeah, I started very, very enthusiastic, saying that tech is fun, but I soon started to wonder if I belong. And people were talking a lot about imposter syndrome, and I do believe that parts of it was that, but also parts of it is the fact that media portrays software developers like this. When you watch in movies, the hackers are the dudes with a hoodie and in front of the computer in the basement. But yeah, that's not true. Engineers look a lot like regular people. That being said, I did not work a lot with a lot of women, so it's partially true. So I don't want to lie to you, but what I can say is, to the question that if I belong in tech, I realized that the answer is maybe. And the best answer I have is that developers are made, not born. So you cannot be born a developer. Everyone had to start learning at some point. Everyone had to mess up, learn Hello World, figure out what networking is about. Some people still don't know, but you know, it's learned. It's even learnable. So, but also it is sometimes hard when you don't see yourself around, and that happens to me often. And it's very hard not to shape yourself into something that belongs. If people don't recognize this, it's a short from Pixar called Pearl, and I highly recommend watching it. But what I can say from my experience in tech so far is that it's not worth to change yourself completely in order to fit in, and that you will find places where you belong as you are. That being said, to get into tech, I will not judge whatever you have to do. Like, shove a foot in the door and do your best and do what you need to do. And then whilst you're in tech, find yourself again. So that was a little bit about me and how I ended up in tech and what are my feelings about it, kind of, and about belonging here. I think I'm at a balance where I'm comfortable, but it's been going up and down. Now, that being said, let's talk about interviews. Again, my advice is to be taken with a grain of salt because it is shaped by what I've experienced, but here we go. Before the interview, I want to tell you that you should always apply. Regardless what you think you know, what you think is needed for the interview, for the job or not, if you see a job that you're interested in, always apply. And the reason is you shouldn't reject. So you shouldn't reject yourself before you even get the interviewers a chance to get to see your application. So you should always apply to jobs. And you should also apply before you're 100% ready. If you're doing a boot camp, if you're close to ending the boot camp, try out applying for jobs. Try out looking at advertisements and seeing job ads and seeing what are they looking for, what are things that you could learn about, what is the language being used. Try to see what people are looking for. And when you start applying for jobs, you should start with, it's going to sound a little harsh, but you should start with the companies that you would be okay not getting a job for. Like if you have a dream company that you've always wanted to work for, do not start with that one. Because the first interviews are harder. The first interviews you're going to have, you're going to be having a lot more nerves, because regardless how many advice and how many YouTube videos you see, it's different experiencing in person. So start slow. Start applying and interviewing for a wider range. Sometimes you might be surprised that going to the interview and talking to the people, you realize that you actually want to work there. And because you were relaxed in the interview, they could actually meet the real you rather than the person that is stumbling on their words. So it is a win-win, and it's not being unfair to the company because you're still interviewing, you're still considering them, and it's just a matter of them being able to convince you that you want to work there, and you being able to convince them that you're going to bring value, and then they should hire you. So yeah, that's kind of that. And also learn about the company. Go to their website. That's very important. Go to their website, learn what their product is, why you think that product is good. If you go to an interview and you cannot say what the company does, then it won't look good. People want to know that you applied to the company not because you applied to the company, even though most people apply to companies to get jobs, to get paid so that they can feed their cats and have hobbies. But you still have to like what you do, because it's 8 hours a day. And when you don't like what you do, it's going to be a very, very hard 8 hours. Yeah, so check their website, check their job ads on LinkedIn, check out what technologies they're working on, try out their product if you can. But then also check out Glassdoor. Glassdoor is a website that has company reviews. You're going to find a lot of things on the company there, including maybe some interview questions, people's ratings on how it is to work there. So it's a good resource to kind of get a feeling, and then you can make your own judgment on if you want to apply, and what kind of questions you need to ask and things like that. No company is perfect. It's often a matter of team. So a certain team could be very difficult, but a lot of other ones could be the happiest place on earth. So try and see what you get through the interview, and ask tough questions to find out if it's really a place that you want to go to. And then get a friend, but not just a friend. A friend will help you move a couch. A good friend will help you hide a body. But also, your best friend will give you, or rather a good friend, will give you really honest feedback, not just feedback that will make you feel good. When you ask, so how did I do? And people say, you did great. And you really know that you haven't. You want the friend that says, you tried your best. These are the things that you could maybe try different. And it's really, really useful to do that. So find someone that can bounce with you, that can do dry interview runs with you, and ask you the questions and help you say the answers to the questions out loud. Because just thinking them and having the script in your head is less helpful than saying them out loud in the meantime.
We have a really good question regarding using like Glassdoor's resources to kind of feed questions to have during those interviews. So Katie asks you, what is an example of a tough question to ask or during the interview or to a future employer?
Well, it depends. And to be honest, in software engineering, you're gonna hear a lot of it depends because a lot of things depend. It depends on what's important to you. What is important to you in your new team? For me, for example, it's very important to know how, like, if I would be in an interview process and I would have to join a company, I would ask, okay, so how is the development budget? Do I get to go to conferences? If I want to give talks, do I get supported? Then I would ask more deeper questions on how do people get promoted in this company? What are the things that matter when people get promoted to different levels? So that's kind of harder to explain, but it's very important because you want the way that people are promoted to be fair. You want to ask what how do they treat feedback? What happens if they're tough feedback? What happens when there are conflicts? You want to ask all the questions that matter to you. So, for example, if for you it matters that you have a person that would be your mentor, for example, you can ask, okay, will I get a buddy when I join in that I can fall back to and ask questions, and that would support me if I'm having issues understanding or doing something or getting a hold of the culture. So it very much depends on what's important to you. So before an interview, I guess I should add this to the slides. Before an interview, you should really ask yourself, what is important to me and what are the things that I care about? That being said, during the interview, how the interview will pan out. I cannot guarantee 100% that this is how it's going to happen, but most of the times, especially, so we're talking about an interview with a manager or a couple of people that are going to talk to you about culture, not directly about tech, but about you as a person, the company, and things like that. So the way it's going to work is there's usually an intro for around 2 minutes where they're going to tell you, hi, welcome to this company's interview process. We're so happy to have you. This is how it's going to work out. And they're going to talk about the structure. And then the next bit is the manager or the person that is interviewing you. They're gonna interview themselves. They're gonna say, hey, I'm this person and I'm the manager for this team, or I have been at the company for X years, or something about themselves. And in my spare time, I like cycling and reading a good book or something. I don't know. Usually in Sweden, people tend to add in a hobby or something at the end of their intros. And then they're going to expect you to introduce yourself. That's not the moment where you're going to wow them with your experience and with your knowledge and with your personality. That's the moment where you show that you can do a short and to the point introduction. So the point is to warm up the room, to get to know each other a bit, but not really be part of the interview. So you have to prepare this part a bit and really keep it short and sweet. Then sometimes they have a company intro. I've been to interviews where they actually pull out slides and showed me on slides what the organization structure is and stuff like that. But maybe there's not a lot of that and they just jump right into questions. And sometimes there's some space reserved at the end for you to ask some questions back. And that is part of the interview. So your intro is not so much part of the interview as much as your questions, because asking questions shows what you're interested in, and that you are interested in the company, and that you're interested in the product and stuff like that. So it's good to prepare some questions to have at the end. Yes, I cannot see the chat, or rather I can see the chat, but I cannot read the chat and talk at the same time. So Brittany, if you see a good question, do interrupt me and ask them.
We do have a question from
Yes.
several minutes ago. Katie, you're asking fantastic questions. Please keep them up. And this is perhaps something we're going to cover 2 weeks from now and the more technical part of this workshop. But Katie did ask, out of 100%, how much coding is actually a part of the interview process for a junior developer looking for their first initial job?
I would say it is a good chunk of it. Usually in this interview, you don't get a lot of coding. You don't really talk about coding much, in my experience. Maybe they're gonna ask some basics, but nobody's gonna expect you to pull out a whiteboard and start solving problems. What I can tell you is coding per se is likely gonna be a big part of the technical part of the interview. There are different types of technical interviews. And the more senior you are, the coding part takes a smaller part. So it's kind of the other way around. Seniors hopefully don't get to see a lot of coding, although we do see a lot of coding too. But more senior engineers, besides the coding assignment, they also have to talk about system design, about architecture, about how would you deal with if the system goes down, with errors and things like that. So for junior developers, usually there's more of an understanding that they have less experience to talk about this, and it's kind of a bit covered, but then it's very important for them to have the basics of how to think around a problem, because in the end, coding is not really what people test for in junior developer interviews. They test for, can you reason yourself around this problem, and then use code to write it up. Can you get feedback? Like if we ask you, hey, so it's a bit messy, how would you refactor it at this point? And then you go like, yeah, interesting. Well, I can see this and that, and this could be improved. Anyway, but I will definitely cover this more in depth in the next session. But coding will be a big part of it. Yeah.
We have a couple of more questions, but
Why do some companies require more than 2 interviews?
yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It depends. It depends what interviews mean, because sometimes you get a home assignment and then you get an interview on the home assignment. Sometimes you get a manager interview, a technical interview, and then a system design interview. And it depends how much you want to join that company, if you're gonna put yourself through that or not. And it's worth, especially when you're at the beginning of your career, it's worth experiencing all kinds of interviews. So I wouldn't say no to interviews. I would just be very, very careful on how bad I feel for not passing it. Yeah. Which is easier said than done, but I would say experience as much as you can. And oftentimes it's you get the numbers of interviews. Oftentimes is you get to talk to a recruiter, and that's more to cover the basics, very basics. It's rarely much. Then you get recommended by the recruiter, and you get into the tech interview, and you get into, sometimes companies differ. They first have the culture interview, then they have the tech interview. Sometimes they have it the other way around. So it depends, but there's usually at least two sides. One to understand how you are as a person, and at least one to understand how good of a technical person you are. And then it depends on the company how many interviews they need to evaluate those two parts of you. And then there's going to be a final interview, which is more of a negotiation around salaries and the offer, if they're gonna give you an offer. If they're not gonna give you an offer, you stop at any point of time. But usually it's these four interactions with a company, where the recruiter, the culture interview, the tech interview, and then the offer discussion. Yes, but let's cover some slides in the meantime, and then we'll stop again for questions.
Yes.
Good. Your intro. In order to keep it short and sweet, you have to start with, I'm this developer at. This template is taken from Cracking the Coding Interview, which is a great book, and I highly recommend it. It looks thick, but half of it is solutions to the problems in the first half. So be mindful that it's only half as big-ish. Although reading through the solutions is very interesting and fascinating. So yeah, but it does explain a lot of algorithms and stuff really nicely. And I enjoyed reading it, to be honest. If you're a junior developer, this might not quite fit you as well. And then I would say you should play to what really defines you, and why are you passionate about technology, and why did you start into tech? What are the things that you've done? If you've been to a boot camp, you say, I'm this. I graduated from this boot camp, and now I'm looking for my first job, and stuff like that. Just keep it under around 2 minutes, and you'll be fine. And again, in Sweden, it's customary to add a bit about your hobbies, or about something that helps you connect as humans, but it depends from country to country, and it also depends within Sweden. So just pay attention to how they introduce themselves, and have the template in your mind, and kind of add things and remove things to mirror what the other people did. Things that you must know before you get into the interview, because you might get a question into it. One question is, what got you to apply here? Do learn about the company. You need to be able to say why you are applying to this company, and it shouldn't be just because you need a job. This is also true, but it shouldn't be the only one. You should know what motivates you, and it might be confusing to be asked this question, because you might not know how to answer it. One way of answering is, you could say, challenges motivate me. That's why coding is so great, because you're constantly challenged by things, and you always have tough problems to solve. You could say that you're motivated by learning, and it's nice to be a software developer because there's always a new tool, a new language, something new to learn, and it's exciting. You could say that collaboration motivates you, despite general perceptions. Programmers do not sit in a corner and code. They often talk to each other quite a lot. So you could definitely say that collaboration is something that motivates you, and you like pair programming or things like that. What will you bring to the company? So what are the skills? What are the things that you would like to bring to the company? And here you can say, I have been focusing on the new technology. Or you could, if you did a boot camp, you could say that I'm curious and I'm driven and I'm persistent. You have to. It doesn't have to be, or rather, please do not put programming languages or tech stack. Put things that are more long lasting, because programming languages or tech stacks get out of fashion, but what doesn't is the things that you do for the company in a way. So, or you could be a person that collaborates really well and communicates well and likes to bring people together. That's also something that's good. So do not underestimate those things. Why are you leaving your current job? That's sometimes asked, but if you don't have a previous job, it's not really relevant. Why did you get into tech? Where do you see yourself in 3, 5, 10 years? These are all very subjective. You can talk about conflict, but sometimes with junior developers you don't. There's a lot of things. And then if you enjoy working collaboratively or not. And you might get asked what your salary expectation is. My 2 cents is that it's always better to ask back that it is an interesting question and that you're more interested how much the company would pay for a person with your profile. And that might surprise you. And sometimes you might get the answer that it's hard to say before the tech interview, and you could answer back that that is great. Then let's talk about it after the tech interview. So my 2 cents is that it's better to get a number from the company rather than say a number. But always have a number in your head of how much you think you would want to be paid, and you feel like it would be worth for you to take a job. It's always good to know. And also if you want remote or in office. Tips during the interview. This is very important. This is more important than learning more tech stuff. Really, I swear. You need to breathe. Sometimes I've had people that just in interviews that just got very, very anxious and really stopped breathing almost. They were answering all the questions and they were talking for a long time, and I tried to calm them down by making a joke or doing something, but it's always harder to show your best side if you're not relaxing and taking a breath. When a question is asked, you can always pause and think about it a bit. And always after some time, pause and check back in with the person interviewing you. That means that when someone asks you a question, try to keep it kind of short, because usually that's not the only question that that is gonna be asked, or maybe that's not even the most important question that you need to answer. So always kind of keep it short, bounce it back, see if what you answered was what they were looking for. Just ask for feedback. Take notes. Always take notes, even if it's in your head and then you put them in notes afterwards. Keep track of what you feel that you could have thought about before, what you feel that you've done great, and what would you done differently. If they mentioned something in the interview that you want to look up, like some technology or some methodology, write it down, search it, know it before the next interview. Because it's always good to jump into interviews as a learning session. You're learning from them how they think about candidates and what do they want from people, and how to be better at the next interview. And again, remember, it's a conversation. I think one of the harder interviews I've had was when I started interviewing someone and I would ask a question and they would talk for 7 minutes, 10 minutes, and answer the question, and I didn't get to ask my second question. And by the end of the interview, I didn't really know the things that I wanted to know in order to evaluate this person for the job. And that person sabotaged themselves because I couldn't really get a chance to get to know them better. And they didn't know what the things that I was looking for were. So they talked about things that didn't really make a lot of difference. So always keep it as a conversation. There's a great platform called Pramp, but that's more for tech interviews. So try practicing with a friend. Try practicing with someone who is already in tech that maybe can do a dry run interview with you. And again, we jumped to this a bit earlier, but here are possible questions that you could ask. How do teams work together? Do they collaborate a lot or not? Do they work with other teams? How would your onboarding look like if you're gonna join the company tomorrow? Can they walk you through how your onboarding will look like? What are mentorship opportunities? What is the development path? How do you help people belong? Are there one-on-ones, which are meetings with managers? So basically, managers have meetings with all their direct reports to check in on them and ask if they need something, talk about development. They all differ depending on the manager. And also, how would they work in this company? Because again, they all differ depending to the company and the manager. What are most challenging issues in the team right now? Does the team work in the office, remote, or a mix? What makes them proud to work there? When was the last time they heard someone being appreciated? And how do appreciations work here? Because that is very important and sometimes neglected. After the interview. But after the interview, were there any interesting questions so far? People have to leave. It's okay. It's recorded.
Yes, it is recorded. I'm going to scroll up a bit to go back to the question of how many interviews is there going to be for one job offer. It just depends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a person asking if the Code Academy's career path are good enough to replace a boot camp. I think being a self-taught developer sometimes is harder than it should be. I think regardless if you're self-taught or not, it's really hard to get the first job, because people often joke that people want juniors with 3 years of experience, and unfortunately that's kind of true. Not a lot of people have openings for true juniors, like juniors that come straight off boot camp or a self-taught path, which is not even guaranteed. That's why I've been thinking a lot about how people can get in tech the fastest. The fastest would be to go to a bootcamp that has a guaranteed job at the end.
Yeah.
And then they kind of have the job to find you a position. And then you get that first job, you get your foot in, and you get to experience how it is to work in an actual software development company and team. And hopefully you will get to learn and grow from there. Do remember that just getting your first job is often not good enough, because sometimes companies don't have the structure and support in place for juniors, regardless if they hire them or not. So always try to reach out to people and find yourself a mentor and learn on the side around what good practices are and stuff like that. It is very important to have a personal, not necessarily a personal website unless you're a front-end developer, but some projects on GitHub. It's always good if you're there at on the web, particularly in different communities. If you join an open source community, for example, and you start contributing and becoming a person that is valuable there, then that would help. Definitely. You should also contribute to open source because open source is awesome. So that's also there. But in general, having projects on GitHub and having experience with different communities in open source is good. Yeah, let's take the platforms for internships and freelance afterwards. And I'm going to go back through the slides and I'm going to talk about the last question.
Mm.
After the interview, if you got a no, it's not a problem. Learn as much as you can from your experience. Learn what the questions were. Try to ask for feedback on what you could do better, both during the interview, like ask for, like, one of the questions at the end of the interview could be, so do you have any feedback for me from what you've seen? And sometimes they will give feedback, sometimes they will not. It is generally difficult for the interviewer as much as the person being interviewed as far as feedback. So, but always there's the next company. And the thing that you need when you're self-taught or right out of uni is to really hang in there. You are great people, and there will be a place that has a spot for you. It's just a matter of time, a matter of practicing, a matter of chance, very much a matter of chance as well. So go out there. Interviews are only for 1 to 2 hours, as in if you get to do both technical and culture interviews, there would be 2 hours of people meeting you. it's hard to make an impression on a person and on their technical level and on their personal level within this time. So remember that whatever happened during the interview, whatever the result of the interview is, it's not a lot of time that people spent with you. So you shouldn't take it hard on yourself. I really like this video, this TEDx talk from Guy Winch, who talks about practicing emotional first aid. It's kind of funny. It talks about this time when he was really, really depressed, and then how you cannot really, it's not true that you can just walk your feelings off. If you have a broken hand or a broken foot, people don't tell you, you know, it's just a foot, just walk it off. So you have to practice emotional first aid. You have to take care of yourself as well. So pay attention to how you feel, and make sure that you drink enough water, you get enough sleep, and you have a supportive group around you that will keep you sane during the process. And if you got a yes, you can always negotiate. And I highly recommend you do, because even if it ends quite abruptly, you still get the experience, and it's a very valuable one. So that's one thing. And you can also, if you get a yes, you can ask if you can meet the team over for a fika or a coffee. In Sweden, fika is a coffee where you talk about things, usually accompanied by sweets. So you can always try to meet the team before, and try to really make sure you want to join. But that being said, regardless of the interview, and this is really, really related to having social presence and a website or a GitHub out there, you really have to dive in. Tech is a culture in itself. It's not just about the programming. It's about the movies that people watch. It's about bonding over sourdough or kitten pictures. But dive in, go to community events, get to know people in tech, learn from them. What do they think? Well, are they interested in mentoring you? Well, maybe that shouldn't be your first question to them, but eventually that could actually happen. And you should really dive into Twitter. There's a lot of smart people out there sharing their opinions. I once gave a security talk, and before the security talk, I think a day before, I read this tweet, and I was like, wow, is my Chrome asking me to update? And I made sure that before my presentation, my Chrome was updated. So thank you. Read blog posts on Medium, on dev.to, and learn about how people talk, what people talk about, what are interesting technologies that are interesting right now, how do people use them, are there things you can try out for free? Learn from videos, go to meetups, however you enjoy to do things, do them, and dive right in. Learn about the culture around tech companies, and that will help, because then when you see weird sounding variables in product names, you won't think that it magically has some meaning, but rather than that some people found it funny and decided that would be great to have as a product name, and it stuck. So there you go. But here's where my presentation concludes, and you have a total of 4 minutes left to ask me all the questions in the world.
We can start from the bottom and work our way up. Sorry for the people previously asking questions, but as Mariana said, we do only have 4 minutes. I really need to go to bed. But this is a really good question. How much balance should there be between a feeling of casual conversation and being formal and serious? I don't want to come across like a stick in the mud, but I also don't want to seem like I don't care.
That's a great question. It depends on the country you're in. It depends on the company you interview for. Try to feel the room and see if this is something that that works, and then adjust. After you've gone to a couple of interviews, you'll kind of figure out how to adjust this. In my opinion, it's pretty casual. You still have to answer the questions, though. Like, you have to give a good set of time to answer the questions that are asked, and also to ask questions, because one of the things that we do, when I was interviewing people, one of the things that we do evaluate it was how interested these people were actually in the company, and did they talk about the product? Were they interested in the company?
Yeah. What's your opinion on the length of a CV? One page with the appropriate links to our work projects?
Yes, maximum 1 page. You do not want to go over 1 page ever. No. You want to have it 1 page. I would recommend against putting ratings of how 5 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 on JavaScript or on Python or things like that. It's hard to really, you look at that and you think, what's a 10?
Yeah.
And it's hard. So keep it simple, make things easy to skim. So make sure you bold the different things, and you have the contacts and the links properly there.
Another question about CV. I have a long experience in a different industry, literary translation back in China. Should I include it in my CV?
That's a great question. Think about what parts map into things that you would do. Like, for example, and do not put it at the top. So keep the things that are closest to the job requirements at the top. So related projects with the similar languages and stuff. And then you can add at the bottom of your CV, you can add job experience if you don't have any other tech job experience. You can say, I've been a translator, but this is how it maps out. Like, I would be very good at writing documentation because I'm really good at structuring, or I'm really good at writing neat code because this and that. So make a parallel on how your previous experience can translate into your tech experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, for example, for me, I've learned usability and human-computer interaction, and I've learned about affordances. And it's so much fun how much those, and I've learned a lot about tech, but those parts that are not tech-related really relate so much to tech in an indirect way, because the way you write things in code, it encourages people that come after you writing code to write code in a certain way, so you can apply these principles. Yes.
Matt and I did a session on CVs that I forgot to record. I'm sorry. But basically, the moral of that story was, if you don't as junior developers, especially going into our first jobs, like we clearly don't have that experience, like the tech experience to put on our CVs. So what we try to do is use previous experiences that highlight our ability to collaborate and to problem solve. If you're good at collaborating and if you're good at problem solving, you're probably going to be a good developer, because that's essentially what being a developer is. So
not only, but yes.
Yes.
Like find the parallels. Yes.
Yeah.
But still, regardless how CVs are organized and stuff, keep the most relevant stuff higher up. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't matter if in general CVs experience is first, and then you have other things. If your experience is not as relevant as your project, put the project section first. Yeah. Cool. Other questions?
I closed the chat. We had another good question. We are 2 minutes past.
Sorry.
People saying thank you. Let me scroll up. Scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, 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 up. I think we answered the majority of them. Something that I just wanted to follow up on, because you said negotiate. Do you think, in your opinion, do you think it's wise as juniors, especially going into our first role, to negotiate our salaries?
Why wouldn't it?
There you go. I don't know. I guess because some, like,
they can always say no, and you could say fair enough.
Yeah.
I think companies that do not allow you to negotiate and would cut you off because you tried to would be a red flag, and you're better off. That being said, if you're too scared, I will not judge at all. Like, again, to get your first job, do what you need to do. Like, the first job is the hardest. Regardless what it is, get that first job, and when you have that first job, things get easier. But the first job is hella hard. I know people that spend 2 years trying to find jobs, like the first job, and they managed to get one, but it was very hard. So whatever you need to do it. If you feel like you can negotiate, and that the managers or the atmosphere was safe enough, I would still recommend to try it out, but do what you need.
Yes. And final question, do you have any recommendations for platforms to find internships and or freelance work? I can post one.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
I'm not sure. I don't know. And it very much depends.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of links for remote work, but I don't know specifically for internships, freelance, or first time, like more heavily with first time jobs. I'm sorry.
One of our members recently got a remote internship through this platform called Radical X, virtual internships. If you were on our Discord, you're more than welcome to ask him for advice. But this is Angel List is one, and then Radical X is another.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We are 6 minutes past. Anything else? Or shall we say, as we say in Sweden, hej då?
Nothing else from me. I'm happy y'all took the time to listen to me rambling, and I hope it will help you in some way. And I will try to join the Discord.
Yes.
And
Please join us on Discord. We are trying to be more active. We post all of our events to it. We post events predominantly based in Stockholm, but as our community grows around the world, we would love for everyone to post different networking and free workshops and different events hosted in their area of the world. Please share. And please ask questions. Next week, next Wednesday at 8 o'clock, we will be meeting with Matt, who is my co-leader. He is brilliant. He can teach anyone. He is like personified can teach a man to fish, but instead of fishing, coding. And he is going to do a basics of authentication next week. And then 2 weeks from now, Mariana, you will be joining us again to do part 2 of this workshop, but with more of a focus on the technical skills you need for a junior developer interview. So yes. And then next month, we will be doing a session on APIs, learn how to use APIs and create them learn how to create APIs by actually just one in this workshop. So stay tuned for that. And then I believe Madison, my other co-leader, will be doing a workshop next month as well, but not really sure on what yet. And I'm bringing back what I call transitioning to tech tales. I previously worked with a lot of people from different backgrounds. Adila will be doing one next month. She has her bachelor's in English literature, and she is now a phenomenal front-end developer working professionally for a consulting firm called Devops here in Stockholm. So, and she will join us and talk about how they transitioned to become a coder despite not having a CS degree. So stay tuned for that.
yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of really amazing people that I know that didn't study software development, and they're still amazing coders. I feel like even if you don't study computer science, you learn a lot of the problem-solving skills by solving other kinds of problems.
Absolutely.
So it is, in my opinion, not a must.
Oh.
Because it is translatable.
It absolutely is. Sorry, one more question for the Discord link, but then I am going to at least end this session for myself. Please send us your questions on Discord. Let's get our channel up and running, or let's get it active. So, and if you have any proposals for different channels or events that you would like us to host, please send them our way. Both Matt and Madison are language agnostic. They can basically teach anything. So, and then we have the lovely Mariana, who is also a host of, founder and host of Google developer group based here in Stockholm. Not sure who's in Stockholm. I'm constantly sharing your events on our Discord as well, but it's a completely free opportunity to get certified using different Google Cloud learning tracks. Sorry if that's not the most accurate of descriptions.
We don't actually provide the